Evening, everyone. Good to be with you. Um, Today, I want to speak on something that I might do for a few weeks. I've been thinking a lot about the sayings of Jesus, the sayings of Jesus. Every so often, I sort of feel a bit guilty, not in a bad sense, but a bit guilty when I'm reading different parts of the Bible, and then I think to myself, it's been a while since I've properly studied, the Gospels. Of course, you have the Gospels in your Bible reading, but at other times I sort of miss the Gospels. And I have a tendency to focus on epistles and things like that and doctrine, but there's nothing so refreshing. It's just reading the Gospels and getting close to Jesus through them. And I remember when I was a young man, and this American preacher came over, very good American preacher, was very good. And when he took the mic, he was he said, "I'm all ready. I'm filled with the Holy Spirit because I've been reading the red. And so I turned to my friend and I said, what does he mean that he's been reading the red? He's all ready to go because he's been reading the red. And my friend said to me, red letter Bibles, where all Jesus's words are in red. So what he's saying is he's been reading Jesus's words, Jesus's sayings, reading the red. I've been reading the red. And that stuck with me, and I liked that. I like that. I got myself a red letter Bible soon after that. I do like Bibles where all Jesus's words are in red. And I like that phrase, I've been reading the red. Well, I don't feel I've been in the red enough, if you know what I mean. All of the Bible is God inspired. Just because Jesus' words are in red doesn't mean they're more inspired than anything else. But it is nice to read the red. When was the last time you were in the red, reading the red? So anyway, I like that. So I've been thinking about Jesus' sayings and wanting to meditate on them. So I think I'm going to spend some time maybe in the coming weeks, just see how it flows, looking at some of the sayings of Jesus and meditate on them with you. So the first saying of Jesus that took my attention was when Jesus said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners." That saying. And so let me give you a context for that. Here we are. Mark 2, 13 to 17. Mark 2, 13 to 17. Jesus went out again beside the sea, and all the crowd was coming to him, and he was teaching them. And as he passed by, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at a tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. And as he reclined at table in his house, many tax collectors and sinners were reclining with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. And the scribes of the Pharisees, when they saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" And when Jesus heard it, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners." So in this context of this saying, we see this is very early on in Jesus' ministry, and he's calling his disciples to him. And it was one thing for him to call common fishermen who wouldn't be as educated as, say, the Pharisees. You'd have thought that people might have thought Jesus would have called the Pharisees to follow him. And some did, but not many. They tended to oppose Jesus and his teaching. But here he passes Levi. This is Matthew, who's sitting at the tax booth. And he said, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. Now, this tax booth that Matthew or Levi was sitting at, what's a tax booth? Well, it could be two things. It could be that the booth is there to tax as wagons passed with their different goods on, and as the wagons pass the tax booth, a bit like modern day checkpoints, the wagon would have to stop, and the tax man would look and see what needed to be taxed and extract tax money, not just for the empire, but also for himself as these goods passed by. Or it could be because he was very close to the sea where all the fish were and fishermen. It could be that this tax booth was there by the waterside, waiting for fishing boats to come in. And as those fishing boats came in, as they landed their fish, there would be the taxman on the booth who'd be counting the fish, and he would be taking a share of the tax for the government and a share for himself. And so Jesus comes up to this very unpopular person. As soon as you got your fish there, you had to pay your tax, or as soon as you got your wagon passed, you had to pay your tax. And he said, "Follow me." And he did. And then we get this picture of Jesus going to a house, and it says many tax collectors and sinners were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And the Pharisees asked a question, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? And so we see that here Jesus is doing something that was not expected of a righteous religious teacher. He was spending time with undesirables. In the culture at that time and rabbinic teaching at that time, tax collectors were as bad as you could get. They weren't just normal tax collectors like we might have today that are legitimately raising the tax that allows good government to take place. But most tax collectors were unfair. Not only did they raise tax for the Roman government, but they also inflated taxes so that they could make money for themselves. If you remember the story of Zacchaeus, who was in the tree, and when he got radically saved, he said, if I've cheated anybody, I'll give them so much more back, because today salvation has come to the house. So tax gatherers were seen as traitors to the Jewish people because of working for the Romans. They were seen as thieves, and they were deeply, deeply hated. Rabbis taught, in some literature, that they were so unclean, so unacceptable before God, that you were not allowed to take any charitable giving from a taxman. You would refuse. You'd say, we don't want your money, because it was assumed that a tax gatherer's money was ill-gotten gain. So people wouldn't even take charity from them. Also, if a tax gatherer entered your home, the rabbis taught that your home was immediately unclean. It was now unclean and unacceptable to God, because this unacceptable person has come into your house and made it unacceptable. And so there was this sort of, in fact, you were also, rabbis taught that you were also allowed to lie to a tax gatherer. Think about that. You were actually allowed to, they were thought to be of such horrible people that lying to them wasn't seen as really lying, to a neighbor or anybody. Lying to them was seen as a protective measure. So you were permitted to lie to a tax gatherer. So these were the sort of like the picture of the time of one of the most hated types of people. And here Jesus is calling one just to follow him. He didn't ask anything else. He just said, follow me. He didn't say, give money to this, that, and the other. He just said, follow me. And he got up and followed me. And then he's at house. He is in Matthew's house, and there's many tax collectors, and he is eating food and drink that has come from taxes. food and drink that has come from taxes, some of which might have been I mean, I don't know if Matthew was honest or not, but some of this that he was eating may have been, bought with money that was unfairly taken from others. So guilt by association. And the disciples were there, and early on in his ministry, associating with the wrong people, and the Pharisees were asking, why does he eat with these tax collectors and other sinners? Sinners were anybody that were not in the view of the Pharisees acceptable by God, sanctified or holy. Sinners were seen as the outcasts of society. And I began to think about this, and I thought of some parallels in today's society. And I thought, this reminds me a little bit like cancel culture. The Pharisees had cancelled the tax gatherers and such from society. They had cancelled them. They had said that they were not acceptable in society and that they should be shunned. They were unclean. To call somebody unclean in those days is basically, in a modern day, to call someone unclean, out there in the world, when they call someone unclean, it's cancel culture. And so I was thinking, this is a bit like cancel culture. And so I looked up on Wikipedia the definition of cancel culture, and it says cancel culture is a phrase contemporary to the late 2010s and early 2020s. Cancel culture is used to refer to a culture in which those that are deemed to have acted or spoken in an unacceptable manner are ostracized, boycotted, or shunned. And cancel culture is huge right now, isn't it? I mean, people are being cancelled left, right, and centre. And I'm not saying that these people who are being cancelled have necessarily done good thing, or I'm not saying that some of these people that have been cancelled are necessarily good people. I'm not saying that the reasons that people are annoyed with them and want to cancel them have no basis for having a go at them. I mean, you've got cancel culture all the time. I mean, think about that manager of the Spanish women's football team. I mean, what was he thinking in this day and age to simply plant his lips on one of the team members? And he's been cancelled. Think about Philip Schofield and how he has been cancelled. And think about how people are petrified of being cancelled if they, on Twitter, if they tweet the wrong thing, or an old photo of when they were maybe a teenager and, in a compromising situation that might have been a little bit acceptable then, but is not acceptable now. How that even if they did things many years ago, they are up for cancellation by a cancel culture. And so we see that more and more people are being cancelled, and cancelled by all things. I mean, look at Nigel Farage. Whether you agree with his politics or not is not the issue. He's on a news program, and Coots decided that they were going to cancel him. They're going to cancel him because he was unacceptable, and he was to be shunned. And you see this all the time. You see this cancel culture. As I said, I am not saying that every person that is cancelled or sought to be cancelled by the culture are necessarily good people, and that sometimes when they want to cancel somebody, they do have something that they need to apologize or they need to sort out in their lives. But the waging of cancelling warfare is absolutely a torrent when it gets going. Everybody wags their finger at this person. And if they've made a mistake, it doesn't matter if it's a mistake. If they've apologized and learned a lesson, it's not enough. They must be punished, ostracized, boycotted, shunned. They are, in Jesus's times, they are unclean. unclean. So where today we use cancel culture, in the religious culture in Jerusalem, it would be unclean. You're unclean. You're a sinner. You're unclean. You're not to be. You're not welcome in our society. You're on the edges of it. We don't want you around us. We don't recognize you. You cannot join in with us. You are cancelled. You are, and so the Pharisees are definitely cancelled. These tax collectors, they were cancelled, socially cancelled by that culture, and called sinners, and a whole group of people that were on the edges of Jewish society. Some of them did business with the Romans, some of them, anything that the Pharisees, and they were the ones that decided, by the way, there's nothing in the Bible that says you can't raise taxes. Jesus himself said, render to God what's God, and render to Caesar what's Caesar's. They thought, when the Pharisees tried to trap Jesus, that Jesus would cancel these people who wanted taxes. But he said, give to Caesar's what's Caesar. So there's nothing wrong with raising taxes, but some of them were bad. But what the Pharisees had done had cancelled them as a group of people. Cancelled them as a group of people. They decided who was clean and who isn't. And so for the Pharisees, it was all about show. It was all about works. It was all about being justified by works. You say that you're holy. You say you're accepted by God. You say that you are a model Jewish member of the Jewish society. Then you need to dress like us. You need to have our same fashion. You need to think like us. You need to follow our teaching. You need to basically agree with everything that we as Pharisees say, because we're the Pharisees, all right? We're the Pharisees. That means that we set the tone. We're the ones that says who's cancelled and who's not cancelled. We're the ones that says what's correct socially, morally, spiritual. We're the ones that have the power to cancel and declare someone a sinner. And we are the ones that have the right socially to commend somebody. So, and we, by the way, we're the top of the tree. We're the top of the tree. We are the righteous ones. We are the Pharisees. We are the models, and what we says go. Well, you have the same today. You have people vying to be those that are the high priests of our society, that say what's acceptable socially and what isn't acceptable socially. And woe betide you if you disagree with them. And so what's happening in our society is that more and more we Christians are becoming social heretics, because we don't believe that acts of homosexuality are fine. We don't believe in gay marriage. We believe that abortion is murder. That's what we believe, because it's a human being, a full human being formed. These things are unacceptable in today's society, and so we are becoming social heretics. We the Christians, we're unclean, and some people pretending to be Christians don't want to be unclean in the eyes of the world. And so you've got bishops, even the Archbishop is very open to the idea of gay love. And there's nothing wrong with a man loving a man or a woman loving a woman, agape, but it's sexualized love that is wrong. That's what's wrong. And, some bishops believe that that's right, and to be commended. Why? And they lean towards some of these bishops. We have some wonderful bishops, by the way, but why am I mentioning the bishops all the time? Because they should know better, and they're in public places. That's why I mention them. I hope there'll be a wonderful revival in the Church of England and Reformation. It'll be wonderful. I was brought up an Anglican, so I'm not anti-Church of England, but these bishops, right? they don't want to be social heretics. And so whichever way culture is going, they seem to be going that way. They are adhering to the Pharisees of the world. And Jesus wouldn't do that. Jesus wouldn't do that. He didn't commend these tax collectors or sinners. He didn't commend them, but he reached out to them. He reached out to them. I mean, next time you see somebody who's cancelled, just imagine a great figure, a great Christian figure being photographed the next day having a meal with them. So this Spanish manager of the women's team, who, silly man, what planet was he on? Kissed uninvitedly, it seems, kissed one of the players afterwards, and now he's just been sacked, and he's the worst person in the whole of the world, it seems, at this precise moment, until the Pharisees find somebody else to make the worst person ever. I'm not saying what he did was wrong. I'm saying he's being cancelled. How about if in the news, in the Sun tomorrow and the Daily Mail, there was a picture of Jesus or a great Christian preacher or pastor sitting down with him having a meal in a cafe? Well, what would be the reaction? How dare this pastor, Christian, famous Christian, how dare this person sit down with someone that hates women so badly, and look in the pictures, they're laughing. How dare this Christian sitting with this manager, he must be commending what he's done. He's sitting with him, so therefore he must think it's okay. I mean, when Philip Schofield and all the stuff that happened there, can you imagine? Famous Christian seen having a meal with him in a pub or something like that, and photographs. How dare this person associate with somebody that's been cancelled? So when someone's cancelled, you're not allowed to be with them, because if you are, then according to the cancel culture, you are condoning everything about them just by doing it. So there's a footballer in trouble for going to Saudi Arabia right now. He's being cancelled as we speak, because he's going to get a whacking great money for playing in a team in Saudi Arabia. He's not a Christian. And everybody's saying because homosexuality is banned in Saudi Arabia, he shouldn't be out there playing football. Well, he's just out there playing football. He actually believes in gay rights, and he stood up for them before, but he's gone out there to play football. But it's not enough. You can't go out there and play football, because that's a cancelled nation. I heard that Tear Fund, that wonderful Tear Fund, that for years and years have been, as a Christian organisation, has been helping the poorest of the poor all over the world, Tear Fund. And they're going to have a conference, but a bunch of Christians are going to come and they are going to protest at Tear Fund simply because they use a well-known bank, and that bank is heavily involved in fossil fuel. So you're not allowed to be in that bank. Yeah, but Tear Fund are not using that bank to promote gas guzzling cars, and we need cars anyway, but it's not enough. You have to totally not be in this bank at all, and we're not interested in what you're doing. What matters to us is the bank you're in, and that the bank are heavily involved in fossil fuels. I mean, what is going on? And I think that this picture of Jesus didn't sit down with these sinners and tax gatherers and condone their lifestyles. He didn't condone it, but neither did he cancel them. Neither did he get on his high horse and cancel them and say, well, what about my, a lot of people are worried in different companies, aren't they? Reputational damage. We can't have this person, using our bank. We can't be associated with that person. Reputational damage. They they have been cancelled and they will damage our reputation. So we must shun, ostracize, boycott, and be seen to have nothing to do with them. Guilt by association, reputational damage. Well, Jesus was suffering reputational damage right there at the beginning of his ministry, because there he was. For the Pharisees, it was just enough that he was with these people. That was it. That was it. It was enough that he was with them. It didn't matter what was going on. They were interested. It was like, why is he there? Why is he with them? And when Jesus heard it, then we get this saying, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. How wonderful. How wonderful. There was nothing in what Jesus said that condoned anything that these tax collectors or sinners may or may not have done. In fact, Jesus understood, and his understanding of them is that they were sick, spiritually sick with sin, and therefore, being spiritually sick, they needed a physician, a doctor, to come and to bring healing. Jesus wasn't like one of these Christians you hear of that loves to go out clubbing because that's where the non-Christians are. And they go out clubbing, but they're not going out clubbing, some of these Christians, in order to be a doctor to the sick. They go out there and they're as near to these non-Christians as the non-Christians are, as near to them as they are. They're not a big shining witness. They're not going as a doctor into a spiritual A&E. Some nightclub is like a spiritual A&E, sick people everywhere, sin sick people everywhere, but they're not going in as one of the emergency doctors. They're sort of like, just sailing very close to the wind, and so, the nearest you get is those wonderful street pastors that wait outside the clubs and stuff to make sure people get home. And I remember at Durham University a few years ago, some of the Christians would they would get up out of bed just as the clubs were shutting, and then they would go to the student clubs and they would make sure that anybody that was worse for wear, young ladies, that they would get home all right. They wouldn't go to the clubs. I'm not making a comment on going to a club or not, but they wouldn't go to the club. They would go afterwards to treat those that were a bit ill, a bit worse for wear, a bit vulnerable, or a bit, and that's sort of the picture we have Jesus. He's there with them as a doctor. He's not sitting there laughing at rude jokes. He's not sitting there, but neither is he there in the sense of like cancel culture, but he's there speaking to them, teaching them, and he's there healing their souls and speaking words of love and the Father. And it says, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but the sinners. He's there calling them. He's saying, you're sick, but I can heal you. You don't have to be like this anymore. And he wasn't asking them to join the Pharisees. He wasn't asking them to change their hair. He wasn't asking them to do all the rules that the Pharisees said that you had to do to show that you were holy. He was inviting them into a relationship with him, And if they had a relationship with him, then they would be saved. Beautiful. It was a personal relationship that healed them. And it's lovely that he says, those who are well have no need of a physician. It's such a powerful thing, because he's really actually holding the Pharisees accountable, who did not believe that they were sin sick, did not believe. They believed that they were righteous. Just like these cancel cultures, when it comes to the extreme that it does, these people sitting there, have you heard them on the news programs? Some of these, I know they don't have anything better to do, but some of these reporters, and they're there giving their opinion and towing the line and cancelling and all this type of things, as if somehow that they are holier than the people that they are cancelling, as if somehow, because they didn't do the particular thing, they have the position and the authority to be able to pass judgment on others, and yet what are their lives like? What are their lives like? So they don't think they need a physician. The problem with Great Britain today is that nobody thinks they need a doctor, spiritual doctor. But I don't need a savior. I don't need saving from my sin. I don't need Jesus. I don't need what you've got. I don't need it. I don't need your God. I don't believe in your God. I don't care if Jesus died on the cross. It's not for me. I don't need saving. Thank you very much. They don't need a physician. And that's how sick they are. That's how sick they are. I came not to call the righteous, but the sinners. And these people knew. They knew about themselves. They knew that things weren't right. And they flocked to Jesus, not to join a new order of Pharisees, but simply to follow a man who taught them things they'd never heard, said that God loved them, and that God was only a prayer away. And it radicalized their lives. So that's a beautiful saying. Thanks, Pastor Peter.